You're listening to an Anderson Entertainment production.
This episode,
stand by for liftoff in FAB Facts.
Well, sir, looks like there's gonna be a gunfight in the Randomiser.
and recorded live in Australia, it's filmmaker Michael Shanks
Is that an Australian accent? Anyway, that's all coming up in Pod 155.
of the Gerry Anderson podcast.
Sponsor!
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's get started. Let's go.
Spectrum is green.
The Gerry Anderson Podcast with Jamie Anderson and Richard James.
Well, I think we've probably offended most of the population of Australia
What?
with that.
Why?
Those
What's wrong with practicing our Australian accent?
Why do you think they're really good?
All right, point taken.
What do you think Australians do? Email us in. Email us in your reviews and complaints to podcast@gerryanderson.co.uk. Now, my name
Yes.
is Jamie Anderson.
Ah,
And I'm here because I'm the son of the late, great Gerry Anderson, and I'm managing director of Anderson Entertainment.
yes.
Who are you?
Well, I'm Richard James, and I'm here because I was asked.
Brilliant.
There we
That's
are.
probably a better reason to be here than the nepotism-based reason I'm here.
Oh, absolutely. I got here on merit.
Yes, you're here on merit. Also here on merit is Chris Dale.
Yes,
who
I should say so.
Today seems to be writing a report with a rather large feathery quill on a
Yes.
scroll. Perhaps that's a clue as to this week's randomizer?
Is I have no idea.
I
Is
don't
it?
know, but he's really
but-
scratching away there.
He's got that lovely sort of powdered wig on as well, isn't he? Looks quite restoration.
Yeah, Chris.
Very nice.
I don't know what
Yeah,
you're
it
up
suits
to,
him.
but yeah, loving it. Okay,
Okay.
now,
Yeah,
other than the randomizer, which he's clearly preparing
Yeah.
for or doing something about, is where Chris sits down in front of a random Gerry Anderson episode and gives us his comments and thoughts, and he'll be doing that at the
Yes.
end of this podcast. What else
Yep.
have we got in between then and now?
Well, in between then and now, we've got the first part of the aforementioned interview with Michael Shanks, YouTuber extraordinaire. We've got some Gerry Anderson news, of course, because as I often say, there's brand new Gerry Anderson stuff happening right now.
Do you say that?
We've
I
got
think I've
Fab
heard you
Facts. I
say
do.
that.
Yes, no, I have once or twice. We've got Fab Facts coming up in a little while, and we, of course, have got some emails, Facebook messages,
Yes.
some YouTube comments. I did mention that last week, didn't I? I'll definitely
Yes.
read them out this week
Yeah, you
from our
saved them.
lovely podstrons. Yeah, I did. So all that coming up.
Well, I can't wait. But
No,
I
I know.
suppose we'll have to wait for all
Yeah.
those things, except for Fab Facts.
Right.
Now, time for this week's Fab Facts.
It's Fab Facts, where I've got a book of Fab Facts, and I flick through the
Yep.
book of Fab Facts, and Richard shouts Fab, and then I read you
Yep.
something from the book of Fab Facts, and we hopefully
Yeah.
call that a Fab Fact.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yeah.
Good. Right, here we go.
Fab! Oh, hang on. Careful.
What?
Well, you overshot a bit there. You carried on flicking when I'd fabbed.
I'm not sure I did, but anyway,
All right.
I make the rules, so. Okay. Well, Richard, you've been watching some of the SpaceX stuff recently, haven't you?
I have, actually, yes.
Well, I'm sure many of you Podstrons will have been following the various SpaceX launches that have been happening in Texas over the past few years. Rather cool. And rather Anderson-esque, I'd say.
Yeah.
The team have been experimenting with vertical takeoff and landing, as well as reusable, as opposed to disposable, hardware. Think Thunderbird 3 more than 0x. In fact,
Yes.
if you're a fan, it's hard not to think of Gerry Anderson vehicles while watching the various takeoffs, landings, and of course, the occasional Meddings-esque explosions.
Yeah, that's true.
You don't have to look very hard at the SpaceX heavy lift, fully reusable two-stage launch vehicle Starship to see a certain resemblance to Fireball XL5.
True, yes.
And of course, we often hear that Elon Musk is a Space 1999 fan as well. He's tweeted quite a few Space 1999 things and clips over the years.
yeah.
But there's an even more direct link between the worlds of Anderson and the world of real-life rocketry than that.
Is there now?
Yeah. Now, Richard, what do you think of when I say HOTOL.
What when you say it like that? HOTOL.
Well, I'd forgotten how to say it.
Right.
HOTOL, yeah.
Well, that's horizontal takeoff and landing, isn't it? I think
That is exactly right. You're on the right track.
Yeah.
The HOTOL project, I find it hard not to say hotel.
I
The
noticed
HOTOL
that.
project was a joint effort by Rolls-Royce and British Aerospace to produce a spacecraft that could be reusable and more efficient than the then state-of-the-art American space shuttle. The project started in 1982 when Elon Musk was about 11.
All right. Okay.
So, just so you know.
Fine.
In addition to some pretty sophisticated new ideas about using air in the atmosphere as a fuel on ascent, HOTOL took off and landed more like a conventional aircraft than rocket, as its name suggests.
Yes.
Fully fueled, the vehicle was too heavy for its own undercarriage. I know that feeling. The engineers solved this problem by using a detachable trolley, which would support the winged rocket as it hurtled along the runway. At the moment of liftoff, this trolley would be dropped, and HOTOL would soar into the stars with a payload of satellites aboard.
Hang on.
What? Does that trolley sound familiar to you? Is that what you're...
Just a bit, yeah.
Of course, it's conceptually the same as the launch from Fireball XL5, which first aired 20 years before the HOTOL project began.
Yes.
Unfortunately, the project never moved past the design stage due to lack of funding and a few design imperfections, although it remains a highly influential design. There are even those who believe that some of the design principles could be very, very useful in modern rocketry. Interestingly, Dad remembered meeting one Alan Bond. Alan Bond,
yes.
an aerospace engineer on the HOTOL project and a founder of Reaction Engines, who told him that he had fond memories of watching Fireball XL5 as a boy. So there you go, Richard
Yes.
and Podsterons. Another case of a Gerry Anderson series influencing real-life technology.
There. Like it. That's great. Also, I think we should have more Fab Facts where you have to say the word HOTOL.
HOTOL is very
HOTOL.
hard for me to say, so I'd rather we had no more about it. But that is rather cool, isn't it? Now, you look at those SpaceX rockets that do look almost exactly like Fireball XL5. You know, is that influence, do you think? Do we know? Can we find out? Does somebody, does a Podsteron listening right now know somebody at SpaceX? Can they ask? Because it feels too similar to be pure chance.
Yeah, you're right. Also, on another note...
Another note.
Well, we do know, don't we, that Gerry was often quite dismissive of his Supermarination and his puppet series and so on. So I should imagine when you meet someone like Alan Bond, an aerospace engineer, who says that, you know, basically he was inspired, had fond memories of watching Fireball XL5 as a boy, that must have struck a chord with your dad somehow, surely.
Oh, I'm sure.
Because, yeah.
I mean, it was meetings like that gradually made him a bit more happy about his puppet contribution and the science fiction side. Although I guess he would have just said, well, you know, it all came from a fascination with aviation and rocketry anyway, so it's only natural that it's going to sort of feed back in. So there we go.
Yeah,
lovely.
Interesting. Yeah, like it. Very nice.
There you go. So if you're happy to continue, I think that brings us rather reusably to the end of this week's
HOTOL Fact! HOTOL Fact!
There's no need to mock my impediment. Thank you very much.
Oh dear. You are, of course, listening. I mean, what else would you be listening to but the Gerry Anderson podcast? Don't forget, you can subscribe to us on whichever platform you're listening to us on and leave us a nice review and a rating and share us with your friends so they get to hear us too and all that stuff.
Please do.
Thank you to all our wonderful Podsterons who have been emailing us in over the last few days to podcast@gerryanderson.co.uk. Steve, for example, says, thanks chaps for reading my review that I left on Podbean. We're nearly at the end of the first episode reviews of all Gerry's shows, just Dick Spanner to go. It's been a funny old year staying at home and writing reviews and quizzes for the Potter's Arms on the Facebook group and reviewing many of Gerry's shows again. I'm looking forward to the 5-Star 5 book when it's released and the many other merchandise that just keeps coming. I may need a bigger house. All the best from Steve.
Sorry, Steve.
Sorry about that. Yeah. Now, Andrew Pixley got in touch to say, brilliant to hear Toby Haydoke chatting on the podcast. He's one of those likeable, talented, enthusiastic people that it's always a joy to be in touch with. That's nice, isn't it?
I absolutely
Andrew
agree.
Pixley. Yeah, great. Mike Hammond says, "Hi, Jamie." Now, this is a very long email. I thought I'd read some of it out, so my apologies to you, Mike. Hi, Jamie. I hope you don't mind the email, but I thought you might be interested in a little bit of info regarding one of the life-size cars used in the film Doppelganger and the TV series UFO. As I'm sure you know, the cars were designed by special effects man Derek Meddings and Ford Motor Company stylist Len Bailey. The Byfleet-based racing manufacturer Alan Mann Racing was commissioned to build the two cars. They cost £10,000 each, which was a lot of money in 1968, and they were built out of hand-beaten alloy and measure 17 feet long, 6 feet wide, 44 inches high. They were based on the Ford Mark IV car chassis. Anyway, I've always been a great fan of Gerry Anderson right from the start of the Supermarination days, so it followed that when I saw an article in the Daily Express back in 1968 entitled "Presenting the £10,000 Doppelganger, a car you just can't buy," I was hooked. He says, "I know there were definitely two cars built for the film, yet in one scene there appears to be three. I understand the third was probably a mock-up for filming purposes. However," he says, "the Foster's car, the lilac one, ended up being bought by a film company called Oppidan and was refurbished at a reputed £8,000 to appear, in an adult film entitled Fluff." Yeah. "Unfortunately," he says, or perhaps fortunately, the money for the film ran out and it was never made. However, the refurbishment was completed before the money ran out and it remained unused in the hands of said film company for a few years until December 1979 when... I bought it."
Yes, lovely.
Yeah, so that's from Mike Hammond, who also very kindly sent us some lovely photographs. So well done, Mike, on that. That's great. Now, I asked over on our Facebook group a little earlier, just before we came and recorded this, for the Podstrons questions and comments regarding the plethora of Anderson Entertainment audio productions that are coming up with Terror from the Stars and 5 Star 5 and so on. Yeah. So Alex Pass says, is 5 Star 5 going to be available from Big Finish? And are there any plans for new Thunderbirds, Stingray or UFO, the list goes on, stories?
Yes, it will be available from Big Finish in due course. In terms of new stuff, our license precludes new stuff currently. Unfortunately. So we are working on that. But adaptations of existing published stuff, yes. So that's what you're going to see the most of. But I still think that's quite exciting, and it's got an added authenticity. So, yeah, that's what we are.
Dave Munns says, how many Thunderbirds adventures can we expect, and will all be released in the same CD and hardback format?
I expect approximately 8 currently.
Right.
Yes, they will all be presented in the same format and the same style packaging, and it'll be a lovely collector's set, and it'll look great on a shelf. Lovely.
Won't it?
Can't wait.
Miles Parrish says, loving the artwork designs for these releases, and I'm excited to receive the books in the mail. Are there plans to adapt the Kevin McGarry Lady Penelope books too? I just read Gallery of Thieves again recently, and I would love to hear this.
That sounds like it might be an exclusive if I say yes. So I'll say maybe.
Right, okay. All right, there you go, Miles. Andrew Hyde says, any more Space Precinct on the way? And also, is Jamie open to the idea of fan submissions for potential audio dramas? And on a similar vein, Tom Holden says, can I have a job writing the Joe 90 reboot? And Simpsons Clip says, if Big Finish creates any Lavender Castle audio dramas, could me and my friend Jack Williams write for them? So where do you stand on fan submissions, Jamie?
It's actually a slightly tricky area copyright-wise. I think we may have covered this before, because you might send something in which is actually very similar to something we're already working on or have already considered or is already maybe even in production, and then you might think, oh, well, they've nicked my idea, whereas actually there aren't that many ideas in the world.
True.
A lot of crossover and similarity. So generally we say, please don't submit stuff. It's not because we don't value people's creativity or think you couldn't do it or anything like that. It's purely from a legal protective standpoint, because we spend a huge amount of money developing these things and paying all the actors and the writers and the engineer and the sound designers and all that sort of stuff. So to put any of those at risk is a bit of a commercial no-no for us. If you wanted to submit, the best way to do it is via an agent. So, if you have got some interest from an agent from your writing, then an agent can approach us and they can do it sort of all safely and properly. That's the best way to do it.
Great. As to any more Space Precinct on the way, I suppose that's possible, isn't it?
Well, I think we should probably have a chat about that after this recording, don't you?
Yeah, fair enough. All for now, but I shall be reading out some more emails next week, and a little later on, some Facebook comments and some YouTube mentions.
Ooh, and I'm looking forward to those, because they're always a bit fruity, aren't they?
No, I pick the nice ones.
Oh, all right, fair enough. Okay.
Always. Yeah.
Well, I look forward to those in due course. Bridging us across from emails to YouTube and other stuff, an interview with Michael Shanks, we normally have something at this point called the Gerry Anderson News.
We do, yes. Are we sort of shaking things up and doing things a bit differently this week, then?
No, we're having the Gerry Anderson News.
Oh, fair enough.
It's the Gerry Anderson
Newsy news.
Oh, lovely.
That's better.
Lovely.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting to have to harmonise this week, so sorry if I got that wrong. But yes, this week's Gerry Anderson News. Well, there's lots of it. So let's start with this. So let's start with some Thunderbirds Terror from the Stars, eh? Oh, it's sounding lovely.
Ooh.
Now, due to a strange scheduling quirk, if you ordered your download copy at Big Finish, it is out now, and you've probably got it. You may have already heard it. Well, certainly some people have heard it, and I've got a little review coming up shortly. The CD and book will follow in 2 weeks. This has just happened because of a few scheduling quirks between Big Finish's schedule availability and where they had slots, manufacturing and various other things. For future releases, we hope, well, we're pretty sure we'll be able to get them really nicely synchronized so that you won't be waiting. Now, if you did pre-order a CD, then you will have had an email from us giving you a free access to the download copy.
Yeah, nice.
So you should be able to get that. If you haven't got that, just drop us an email, support@gerryanderson.co.uk, and Louise will help you out. It's sounding rather lovely, so if you haven't heard it yet, here is another short sample to whet your appetite.
Through his binoculars, the Hood, now concealed behind a ridge near the crag, saw Scott reappear from the ruins of the fortress and make for the top of the stairway leading down to the desert plain.
At last! What is that he carries? It glows like a colossal jewel. Tracy lied! He did not come to rescue anyone! He lied to deceive me as to his real mission. It is not the first time that International Rescue have used their resources to recover hidden treasure. You fool! You are not clever enough by half, my friend. Your treasure shall be mine.
He snatched up the high-powered gun beside him and focused the telescopic sight on Scott. He squeezed the trigger, and the sharp crack cut through the still desert air. A second later, there was a vivid flash that obliterated Scott from the Hood's vision. And the crack of the exploding missile echoed after the first detonation. And then the Hood's jaw sagged. Scott was walking on, starting down the stairway to the desert below.
It cannot be! It exploded before it reached him! What is this? Some new invention of the accursed International Rescue? An invisible protective armor? Bah! If I could trail him to their secret base. But I cannot fly as fast as Thunderbird 1. Ah, I have an idea. But I must hurry, or it will be too late.
The Hood scrambled down the slope to the ridge where his armored helicopter car was hidden. He pressed a button on the control panel, and a false bottom slid back to reveal a bullet-shaped capsule just large enough to contain his recumbent figure. As Thunderbird 1 rose slowly into the air and headed west with extended wings, the capsule hurtled over the ridge and rapidly overtook it. For an instant, the projectile hovered above the rocket plane, keeping pace with it. Then it descended, and with a clunk of magnets, clamped itself to the silver hull like a limpet to a rock. A moment later, Thunderbird 1's wings were retracted, and the great craft accelerated to hypersonic speed. In the cockpit, an electronic warning flashed and bleeped, but Scott Tracy was oblivious to it. He sat staring sightlessly at his instrument bank, mechanically repeating the same thing over and over.
London. I must get to London.
And on a control console at his side, the blue-white sphere glowed wickedly.
I like that.
Oh, the Hood's a naughty boy, isn't he? Now, obviously, that'll give you a little flavour. You may have heard the other clips online. There's more on our YouTube channel. But the reviews are starting to come in, and I thought I would share this lovely quote with you from Jack, our lovely friend at the Security Hazard blog, the Gerry Anderson blog. He says, "Terror from the Stars is nothing short of a miracle. There are so many things that could have gone wrong. Voices that just didn't sound right, music that strayed too far from Barry Gray's work, modern sound design which washed out the charm of the original series. The finished product, however, is a thoroughly researched and respectful production which culminates in an utterly thrilling adventure, transporting listeners back to the Thunderbirds we all know and love." Oh, isn't that nice?
Oh, yes.
And I agree. Thanks, Jack. I really appreciate your thoughts on that, because there are lots of things that could have gone wrong, and everybody worked really hard to make sure it was as authentic as possible. So I think mission accomplished. More on future releases very shortly. In the meantime, something else some of you are waiting for, the Space 1999 cosplays. Goodness me. All this COVID stuff and international lockdowns and shipping issues, it's amazing the effect it has, and everybody on this side has coped remarkably well in terms of operations and logistics and getting stuff manufactured. Anyway, they are arriving at our warehouse, we are told, this week, and we'll get them turned around and out to you as soon as possible. And there may be some other sleeve colours coming quite soon too, if you don't fancy a Koenig or a Carter. Perhaps you like a bit of red or purple in your life? We'll see.
Great.
Richard, something you've probably been watching on loop, I imagine, is Chris Dale's lovely Demeter City Blues title sequence. Podstron, have you got any suggestions for other title sequence mashups we could do? I haven't got any particular thoughts myself, but if you can think of a great combination, perhaps you think Thunderbirds meets the A-Team. There you go, there's a suggestion. Drop us a line, podcast@gerryanderson.co.uk. If you fancy some reading about Terrorhawks, then, oh yes, it's the Randomiser General again. He's been at it. He's written all about the case files of the Badwater County PD in Terrorhawks, all the strange things that happen there to poor old Sheriff Bull. If you want to have a read of that, go to gerryanderson.co.uk. And my final little hint in this week's news is that this week, in the next 2 days after release, we are recording our next exciting story. So stand by for casting, story, cover and pre-order announcements in the next couple of weeks. It's all rather exciting, but that is the end of this week's Gerry Anderson news.
That was the news! That was the news!
All right, I see. So I invite Podstrons to send in their sung submissions, and then you leap back in and do it.
Let's call it my swan song. And maybe next week we'll start with some listeners' attempts.
Well, we'll see about that, won't we?
Yeah, all right. Okay, yeah, good. There's lots of news, isn't there? It's all going on.
There always is.
Yeah, it's true. Now, talking of things going on, over on our Facebook group, our Podstrons have been very busy. Doug Morris, for example, said, "I saw the 1969 film Marooned." Have you heard of this, Jamie? It stars Gregory Peck, David Janssen, Gene Hackman. No, it's on Prime
Rings a
Video.
bell, but I don't think I've seen it.
Well, he says, as most podders will know, this film won the Oscar for Best Special Visual Effects in 1969 over Journey to the Far Side of the Sun, or Doppelganger. Although Marooned has some impressive effects, it's nowhere near the great effects provided by Derek Meddings for JTTFSOTS, IMHO. Having said that, he says, Marooned isn't a bad film. Thank you for that, Doug. John McDonald says, I've just finished something else new to me from our fabulous Anderverse, namely Gemini Force One Black Horizon, on audio from Big Finish and Anderson Entertainment. Being from the Supermarination era, I'm looking forward to the future new imaginings of well-loved classics that are coming our way, but discovering stuff from After Space 1999 that I never knew existed thanks to our podcast is even more exciting. He says, Gemini Force One comes into this category, and I really enjoyed it, though the source material feels that it's aimed at a slightly younger audience than myself at times. Jacob Dudman does a sterling job telling the origin story of this newer Anderson universe, which has slight nods to the Thunderbirds concept, and copes excellently having to do many teen and female voices during the course of the story, which couldn't always have been easy to get right. He says it's set in present times with some pop culture references and sci-fi leanings, and this story is based on believable science, giving this tale a modern edge, as does the darker and tragic moments that occur in the life of our hero Ben Carrington. Overall, I'd say this was pretty good, and I'd recommend giving this a go if you haven't tried it yet. Looking forward to the next instalment in the series, Ghost Mine. Very good, and that's from John McDonald. Jamie, are we done with Gemini Force One?
Well, we'll be putting out White Storm, which is the third book in the series, later this year. And we might even do a little collector's CD set of all three, possibly.
Oh, nice.
But who knows? Gemini Force 1 is certainly not over. There are more stories to tell in the future. So, yes, who knows? It's just we can't do everything at once, which is a bit annoying sometimes, actually.
That's true, yeah. Mark Perkins posted, at Christmas 1969, following on from the classic annuals featuring Thunderbirds and then Captain Scarlet, there came a peculiar hybrid, a joint Thunderbirds Scarlet annual. I only recently got hold of a copy and I was fascinated to see some proposals for 5 new pod vehicles. As some fans regard the information in these books as canon, I thought it might be fun to share them. I'll post one a day and see what fellow podstrons think of them. Now, he's posted some pictures and they include the mini crane, forest crab, a bridge builder, hover transporter, and my favourite, the disco copter, which has a top speed of 600 miles an hour and a 30,000 mile range. But as Mark says, not so much a pod vehicle, more like a Thunderbird craft in its own right.
Yeah.
It's a very nice design. So I'd like to ask our podstrons, what's the best Gerry Anderson craft we never saw? Did you ever design any yourself? Have you got any ideas? Did you used to doodle your own sort of Gerry Anderson-esque craft? Have you made a Thunderbird 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12? What's the best Gerry Anderson craft we never saw? Email us in podcast@gerryanderson.co.uk. And I'll read them out next time. And finally, Ralph Titterton, who we know well and love, says he loves the brilliant new Space Precinct titles, recreating Hill Street Blues. As Sergeant Fredo would say, let's be careful out there. Or perhaps, let's do it to them before they do it to us. If you're old enough, you'll recognise the quotes. And that's from Ralph. Yeah, that was really sweet, wasn't it? The Space Precinct titles given the Hill Street Blues makeover. Very nice.
Lovely stuff from Chris Dale again. You see what a clever chap he is, all those things. And I've got some other ones that I'd like us to do, so watch this space for future ones.
And entirely appropriate. I remember Gerry saying in various press junkets that Space Precinct was Hill Street Blues in space.
Yeah,
so
literally.
There you go. We did it.
Spot on.
Very nice.
You can find that at the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Gerry Anderson TV. Now, Richard James, is that enough from this little segment from you?
Oh, I should think so.
I thought so as well. Now, look, we made a discovery thanks to producer Ben Page. And that discovery was Michael Shanks.
Oh, yes.
And he's our interviewee today.
Great.
Ben sent me a link to his short film Rebooted, which has nearly 4 million views on the YouTubes. And it tells the story of an out-of-work stop-motion character. It has a lot to say about the value and charm of practical effects in the digital age. In addition, he's got 2 feature films and a TV series in development, and he did a TV series for one of the Australian channels called Wizards of Oz, which some of you may have seen.
Yeah.
So Michael's a really creative guy, really, really nice. Had a really interesting set of thoughts on all things Thunderbirds, and an unusual take on a potential reboot or remake, which I think we will hear next week. But for now, shall we hear part 1 of Michael Shanks?
Oh, yes, please.
Okay, here is part 1 of Michael Shanks.
Hello, my name is Michael Shanks. I'm a filmmaker, primarily a writer and director based in Melbourne, Australia. I make lots of content that's sort of like, I guess if I were to sum it up, like kind of weird premises, sort of like unique premises with a strong sort of reliance on visual storytelling with a heavy kind of visual effects sort of component.
Okay, nice. Is that how you pitch your projects to potential, backers and distributors, saying, weird premises? Yeah. Is that
something of that? Some shade of that, but yeah, weird premises often I think makes people think of like wackiness, but like honestly, that's when I know that I'm excited enough about a project to pursue it. I think when you're a creatively minded person or a writer, you have lots of ideas, but for me, I think the skill is trying to know which ideas are worth pursuing, because when I pursue an idea, I obsess over it for years. So I want to make sure that it's actually a worthwhile thing to obsess over. Like there are so many, my medium is film, and there's so many films that I watch that whilst they might have like kernels of great truths in them, just from a zoomed out point of view, I find the setup so banal that I feel a bit like it's hard for me to imagine that this was necessarily a person's passion project unless it maybe genuinely reflected their personal life story. Whilst I think with particularly now as I'm trying to move into kind of longer form stuff, my hope is to make stuff whereby in a sentence you can sum it up as something completely unique, but within that experience of watching it, you can hopefully receive, more nuanced and broader truths in the work, despite like a premise that sounds kind of wacky.
So, but wacky with meaning and something people can take away, and that means something to you. Is that?
Yeah. Hopefully,
that's the sort of
like
summary.
I like making. I think the way that I know that an idea is worth pursuing for me is if I have an idea and I suddenly become totally freaked out that somebody's already made it, and I, will spend weeks Googling every iteration of it just to see, if so much as like a sketch was done with the same idea, I'll have to abandon it, which is probably like bad, but that's just how I kind of feel.
No, that's probably a really good approach. So does that mean you've discarded some things which actually were really awesome and you wish hadn't already appeared in some form somewhere? Is there a junk pile?
Well, the weirdest one for me, and I guess I don't mind talking about it because again, with like these ideas, I feel like, oh, if somebody stole this because I'm so particular about it, but I just don't think somebody would. But I was convinced. I was telling a friend like, oh, I can't remember the name of this film, but there's a film that has this premise, and man, it's the best premise. Like I was so jealous because I really wanted to make that premise. And then he was like, what's the film name? I was like, oh, I could remember. And I Googled it for like years, and I could just never find it. I became convinced that I just came up with this idea, but I still have this lingering sense of doubt. So actually, if anybody listening has seen or heard of this, then that would be good. But I've actually now developed it into something more specific, and it would go its own way anyhow. But the short idea was that it was a feature film that was losing its budget as it was going on. And that was an idea that I thought was really neat. I thought it was neat from like the idea of like within the universe, like you're just watching a movie that like starts really slick and really polished and looks like it cost $1 million. But over the film, the windows leading into space just become green screens, and the CGI main character just becomes a guy in a suit covered in dots, and slowly and doing kind of like a Don Hertzfeldt thing with it, whereby, if you watch Don Hertzfeld's Rejected, the world of the animator falls apart, but we see it only from the characters within the animation. So the paper will start to crinkle, and that will, start to kind of act like wind blowing against the characters. And I think that's a really kind of funny way to express like existentialism, like the idea that within a film, the characters are in this very constructed, very fake world, and yet they have to treat everything and react to it like it's real. So if they suddenly saw a green screen, is that the equivalent of, Truman seeing the sunlight fall out of the sky? Or is that the equivalent of, somebody like seeing that God is real or that God isn't real with irrefutable proof? Like, what would that do to somebody? I think it's just kind of a funny sort of meta idea.
Yeah, exactly. So being suddenly exposed to what makes it real or not, as the case may be. I think that premise probably pretty well potentially describes your creative style and the way you think about creativity. So we'll definitely come back to that later. But there was a phrase you used in there about the constructed world and the characters within it that have to treat it as real, and that sort of, in a really ugly segue, can lead me straight into the worlds of Gerry Anderson. Michael, how's that? You see what I've done there?
Beautifully done, so smooth.
Thank you.
Like a Segway with big puffy tires.
Thank you very much. That's what I was going for. So I know that Ben, who reached out to you, obviously checked to make sure that Anderson stuff meant something to you, and he fed back that there was some memory of a Tracy Island toy, which is always a good start. And I think you may be our first Australian guest in over 140 podcasts. So
wow,
thank you for doing that.
I'm honored, although I must confess I am secretly a New Zealander, but I've lived here for so long that I feel, in any meaningful way, I am culturally Australian. But
in fact, do you know what? You've made me realise David Tremont at Weta, who one might think of as a New Zealander, is actually an Australian. So, okay, you were kind of reverse things.
Yeah.
So, okay. Gosh. So you're New Zealand. So I've just offended both the population of New Zealand and you by calling you an Australian. Is that right?
I have an Australian accent. Well, I say that my partner's English, and so I sort of just have this like just very, very Anglo accent. But, it's more Australian than it is anything else. But I get asked by Australians, what's your bloody accent, mate? It's a bit cooked, because that's how most Australians talk.
Yeah, that's great. Now I'm really convinced of the Australian thing. But Australia is a kind of a spiritual home of Anderson stuff because in the 60s, Kerry Packer bought Thunderbirds in perpetuity. And so Thunderbirds has had a kind of very long and consistent history in Australia. Am I to assume that Thunderbirds is your first exposure to the world of Anderson, or is it something else?
I think it was Thunderbirds. I think Thunderbirds was basically, you know, the Anderson thing that was a big part of my life. This was back in New Zealand. It's funny because even when I was growing up, I was born in 1991. It was an older show, I think. Like I spoke to my brother recently and brought it up, and I had remembered us both loving it. And I remember my brother said, like, nah, when he was a kid, because he's older than me he's 7 to 8 years older than me. To him, it was like, nah, this isn't Pepsi Max enough. This isn't, you know, this isn't WWF. This is old crap. And I was like, it's so cool. I wonder if it also maybe hurt his impression of it, because the main place that I remember watching it, I watched it at home, but I would watch it at my grandma's house. Like, you know, one of those, it was kind of a, you know, I don't mean to say it was spooky, but it was, you know, my grandma lived alone and we would go and visit her. And I was just like very young, and it was a house that like smelled like old people's houses. Yeah. And I didn't really know what that was. And it was always silent. There was never any music. There was one clock that was just incredibly loud and would just go, you know, it felt like the set of a Pinter play or something. And it was just kind of a bit alienating.
Yeah.
And I remember, you know, my mom would take us and she'd be catching up with grandma and helping her out. And I was just kind of too young to do that stuff. So I'd like go, there was a little TV in the far bedroom and just sit there. And I just felt like that was what was on. It was always like mid-afternoon Saturday or a Sunday, and it would just be Thunderbirds. And I just loved it. It was, I mean, it still is. It's such a unique form. You know, I'm not going to explain it back to you. That's really funny if I was like, no, the thing about Thunderbirds is, but you know, outside of something like just in like an obviously like very overt parody, like you know, Team America, it's so distinctly its own thing, and that's I don't know, like that's like a level of like iconography that so few things can hope to achieve. And yeah, but
it's interesting though, because that it doesn't work for some territories and some demographics and that kind of thing. You know, we're like in the UK, we from the 60s or 50s onwards, really, puppetry was everywhere, and it was a kind of natural, although very, very smart and well kind of structured technological push in that area. But in the US, for example, puppets never really became a thing. They were always figures of comedy. And I don't know where that sat for Australia, New Zealand, whether there was a heritage of puppetry and that's why it made it more accessible for you.
I'm trying to think of, you know, other puppetry from New Zealand. You know, I remember certainly seeing puppet shows as a kid. I'm just thinking of Meet the Feebles, which I definitely didn't see as a kid, but that's like a New Zealand thing with puppets that comes to mind, that Peter Jackson, like, you know, raunchy puppets movie that he made.
Ah, yes.
It's funny that it doesn't work in America, because was America where they did like HR Puff and stuff in Lidsville, which was not puppets, but they were sort of, I mean, speaking of my grandma's alienating house and watching something on the television, I saw the first episode of it, or I watched an episode of a show called Lidsville. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
It was something, you know, when you're a kid and you hear a radio jingle like once and your brain just goes, yep, that's in your head till you die. Yep. And you don't even really remember it. I have like the Lidsville theme song, like just drilled into my brain from one time watching this show at my grandma's house. And it was like only a couple of years ago that I kind of thought I should look this up. And I watched it, and it was as much of a nightmarish fever dream as I remember. It was this won't take too long, but it was Butch Patrick, right? Who was the kid who played the Wolf Boy on the Munsters, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
It was him in like a kind of swinging 60s, swinging 70s like show. He was like a teen, but he went to a magic show and was so stunned by it that he snuck back in to see how the tricks were done, to see what was in the magic hat. And actually the hat grew and he fell into the hat. And inside the hat, he ended up in another realm called Lidsville, where everyone was an anthropomorphic hat. So you've got one human, like young teenage boy, like maybe like 13, 14.
Right.
And he's running around with a bunch of like giant, wearable puppets of like hats, and they were all like racial stereotypes. So there'd be like a rice paddy hat, with a Fu Manchu mustache, and there'd be like a sombrero, and they'd all do accents that if we impersonated now would be rightfully locked up.
Let's not do those then.
It's really funny. I recommend watching YouTubing the opening sequence of Lidsville. So if that's the American equivalent of like their sort of like, puppety thing, oh, it's awful.
Yeah, you can see maybe why it doesn't connect culturally. I mean, they're much more into kind of worn puppets, glove puppets, Muppet style puppets than elsewhere. True. But even between you and your older brother, then he had a view of this is kind of old. This is old hat. It's too retro. But for you, for some reason, it connected. So what But you got any idea why that might be? I mean, besides different personalities, what grabbed you at the time?
It's fun. I mean, I was always kind of into sort of more retro things. I think I really liked, which kind of explains to where I've gone with my career. I think I liked that I could tell that they were puppets in a way. I kind of liked that I could solve the puzzle of how it was pulled off, in a very abstract sense. But, the work that I do is very VFX heavy, and I do most of those VFX myself. And, when I was a kid and DVDs started coming out, I would buy DVDs to watch the special features. I would just watch those behind the scenes because I just loved seeing the deconstructions. And, we mentioned magic with Lidsville, but there was like seeing magic tricks getting explained to you, but the explanation of the trick made it more magical. Yeah. And that was wonderful. So, watching something old, like watching, old Harryhausen, for example, like I knew it, I didn't think it looked real, but I just thought it looked awesome. I thought it was cool. I thought it was neat, I guess. And I think, Simon, my brother, just maybe was just too old and cynical by the time I was like conscious of that stuff. Although he did watch, he used to watch, which was puppet adjacent, which was stop motion, was Celebrity Deathmatch. Do you remember that?
I haven't thought about that for years. Yeah, I remember that. Wow, that was kind of like a proper kind of claymation stuff and quite gory. Is that? I haven't seen
that. That was very the Pepsi Max generation. It was.
Yeah.
Gosh, who were the celebrities that would be? It would be like, tonight in the Celebrity Deathmatch, it's Hanson beat up like Marilyn Manson. I just put that out of my hat.
That's nice.
But I assume that actually might have been an episode.
I have a weird feeling that I actually remember that specific one. So maybe that was one of the best ones.
I mean, it's just the most 90s thing to me is like, Hanson sing pop songs and have long hair. They are losers. Marilyn Manson's like cool and radical. What if they fought? Like back when, schoolyard humor was like, hey, Barney the dinosaur? What if we like shot him? Wouldn't that be crazy?
Yeah, which I'm sure they ended up doing in Family Guy or similar. So that it seems very much like your brother is very much in that Team America and Celebrity Deathmatch area, kind of the use of those characters for parody and comedy, whereas you were more interested in the technical side.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely love the parody and comedy stuff too. I to this day, I just love deconstructing things. Like this is probably, I don't know if this is considered gauche, but there are certain films that come out that I will never see just because I won't get around to them. I don't have a problem with them. But if I know they're like effectsy movies, I'll still seek out I'll watch the effect sequences so I can read interviews with the people that made them and watch the breakdowns and that sort of thing. Because I just love it. Like to this day, even with there's lots of there's a style of CGI that I love that's going for realism, but it just looks fake. But I kind of love that it looks fake. It's I'm trying to think what I mean by that. I think there's lots of movies that come out of China that have and India that have huge visual effects sequences, and they're just not quite up to the level of say an ILM or a Weta. Yeah. But they look better than I could do, and they look awesome. I just kind of love seeing. I just love seeing, where technology goes and the limits of that. I find enjoyable anyway.
There's something about accepting the limitations and being willing to show how something is done or accept how it's done. And I mean that fits perfectly with the Super Mario Nation era, 100%. There was, they were trying to be the best possible puppets and filmic setups they could possibly be, but you still know. There's no pretending. We're not trying to pretend these are human characters. And, I don't know if you saw any of the later Anderson stuff like Captain Scarlet and Joe 90, and they went for kind of very human proportions rather than acknowledging that they're puppets. And I think they ended up being less successful as a result, because they're kind of leaving the realm of not even Uncanny Valley, really, because they were so kind of so static and so tiny. The scale, they still stuck at third scale, but the heads were shrunken right down. And I don't know, it kind of lost something. There's always two camps in that, where they prefer the large heads or the smaller heads. But it does lead me into a thing which we constantly hear, and I am kind of in the middle of this, and I feel like you might be too. There's always that argument of, CGI, it's easy, VFX stuff is, there's no real craftsmanship there, which is not true. There's digital craftsmanship. And so there's a school of thought there that says, practical stuff is real, always will be real, behaves according to the laws of physics. And that's something that which you cannot recreate perfectly enough. So you either try and do it really, really well, or go over the top and it looks kind of fakey, or you accept it and have it slightly stylized. Where do you sit on the kind of the best tools for the job side of things? Do you think there's such strength in practical effects that we should never leave them behind and use that as much as possible? Or are you more towards the kind of best, most modern tool available, let's use it, or kind of where I am, which is somewhere in between?
Yeah, I think I'm definitely sort of on the in between, because I love both things, and I think that the thing, I feel really sorry for proper VFX artists, because I'm a VFX artist, but I'm really just a VFX artist like for myself and kind of smaller productions. But the way that I understand it is that and then there are obviously, as you say, like there's so much craftsmanship in CG. Like those proper VFX artists are incredible craftsmen and women. I think the reason whereby VFX can be bad, and lots of people talk about this, it's usually a limitation of time and budget. And as I understand it, and I'm not an expert on this stuff, the way that like VFX vendors quote for jobs, it's a flat fee. So there will be a deadline where everything has to be finished. And the VFX artist will finish the shot, but then the director will want a change and another change and another change. And suddenly, you're getting right up to this deadline. People get pushed overtime without getting paid for it because there's a flat fee. They can't ask for more money. I think, with practical, usually if it's like part of main production, like everybody's on the clock. Like you've got to shoot that stuff and you've got to kind of get it right. And then you move on. And I think the problem is more, less so with the artists. And I think just with like the delegation of tasks. And it's a lot easier for people to think, well, we'll do it in post because then we're not eating up into the really expensive main production time. And I think, CGI, I in my productions, I'd love to do everything as practical as possible because in some ways, well, it's a little more mysterious to me because I've done so much kind of computer stuff that I get thrilled when I get to work with people that can do stuff that I can't even comprehend.
So there are natural constraints for both types, for the VFX side, because of, like you said, the kind of this is the fee and you will keep fixing it until we're happy or until we're out of time. Exactly. So there's a one shot thing. I mean, we did a sort of pilot mini-sode for a puppet show, kind of modern interpretation called Firestorm, and I was really fascinated by the comments. So we went as practical as possible. We used VFX to layer stuff up, and a lot of the puppetry was shot against blue or green, and we were comping stuff in
cables, that kind of thing.
Yeah, because we're going for rod driven puppets for these.
Oh yeah, right.
But the puppets were facial animatronics, quite high end, and when we put it out, there were a load of comments of, CGI characters will never work. So we'd taken practical to a level where actually for kind of Joe Public, to them it had crossed into the realm of being CGI. And so I wonder about how much an audience really cares. Really, they think they
definitely.
But if they can't even identify what is real and what isn't, then actually perhaps we're putting too much weight into the argument and listening to the kind of the loud minority. And there's just a lot more to it than just how it's done.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that, audiences are willing to take abstractions much more so than a lot of, filmy people will admit. I know that like we think of audiences being, much savvier these days, but like think about like the effects in the original Star Wars or the original Alien. There's bits and bobs in that looks really bad, but Ghostbusters, but nobody cared because we cared about the world. And there's something about practical things where, like particularly with practical characters, where they don't look quote unquote real, but they're very charming. And I don't just mean from like a like kind of film nerd people like us who like love, to go, oh, puppets, all this, da, 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 da. But I think just when generally, even if it's not an actual thing, it's in the scene and it's being interacted with people. And, we can get to this if we want to talk about a short film I recently made, but I've been thinking a lot about why people find stop motion characters quite charming. Like even people that don't really know anything about film, when they see stop motion characters, they kind of fawn for them. And my kind of, what I was sort of, my kind of thought is we all played with dolls as kids. We all played with some degree of a doll or an action figure or a teddy bear or whatever. And when you see kind of a small thing that's actually real and it's being moved around, it kind of resonates like your childhood pineal gland back to life. And you feel this like, it's not real, but you kind of want it to be, because when you were a kid, you were playing with something janky and broken, and you knew that wasn't a real living person, but your imagination would make it real, would connect that dot. And I sort of wonder if even as jaded, cynical, calcified adults, if we don't, want to take that leap again.
So toys come to life as an kind of an access point for nostalgic play imagination. Is that your kind of your analysis of it?
Yeah, it's like a PG version of something Freudian. I'm not sure what, but
no, I totally get that, but that's the thing, isn't it? Like a lot of the adult fans of Thunderbirds now, who grew up on it in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, because it's been reshown so many times, they're completely in love with, I think, the access that it gives them to nostalgia. And it's not just the experience of watching something, but you're right, it's the experience of playing and doing and acting. So that may be the access point for how it runs deeper. So we'll get to it's rebooted, isn't it? The one you're talking about, your film. So we'll get to that, because that is a really interesting combination of techniques, and I know people can go and watch that.
I just had another thought about the prac versus CGI thing.
Yeah.
Which is that I'm in the process of trying to actually get a feature shooting soon, but it'd be funny to listen back to this in 2 years when that never happened, and I'm living as a pauper. But it is most of the work that I've done is comedy, but this is actually like it's a very serious dread-filled horror film is the idea. And if you were to go into a smaller subcategory of genre, it would be body horror. It's kind of a relationship drama that's also a body horror. And, my thought process was, when I'm writing these kind of intense body horror sequences, I'm like, it's got to be practical. It's got to be practical, because we all know practical is what you want for like body horror. And I'm thinking back to, the masters of the genre, Cronenberg and that era of work. But then, this is taking nothing away from those people. I think The Thing is like my favorite film. That's obviously like a John Carpenter film. The puppets and practical effects in that are amazing. And they did that, the second The Thing remake in the noughties, where they did it with CGI, and the CGI looks sort of rubbish. But the CGI looks really bad. But if you go back to the original Thing, it looks amazing, and I love it. But it doesn't like look quote unquote real. No. Like it looks like an incredible abstraction of reality, which in a way kind of makes it grosser. And the other, and that was Carpenter, but the Cronenberg stuff is again pretty similar. Like my pitch when I was pitching this film to get some funding was that this is body horror, but this is body horror from a very muted, dread-filled modern horror perspective. I was saying to the funding bodies, it's not a bunch of puppets covered in lube. But in the back of my mind, I was going, but it probably is puppets covered in lube, because that's how you do body horror. Yeah. And meeting with kind of puppet people and practical people about the VFX sequences, because I'm not going for something as out there as something like a Stuart Gordon film like From Beyond, that actually CGI, the more into prac people are saying probably CGI will be the better solution, just because it's more subtle but it's so easy to think of like that, Second Thing remake in the noughties and just go like, CGI body horror, that can't work too well. But I think that doesn't work for a multitude of reasons, not just because it is CGI. And I feel really overdue in watching this, because it's actually really similar to this project. But I watched 1981's Possession last night. I don't know if you've seen that.
I have not seen 1981's Possession.
Oh, it's wonderful. It's got a when you watch a movie from like 40 years ago, and it's like just exactly your thing, and you're like, how did I never see this before? It's got like a really young Sam Neill in it in full like creep mode. Everybody's, super over the top theatrical performances, but there's a reveal in it, if mild spoilers for Possession, where Sam Neill believes his wife is having an affair explicitly knows she's having an affair with him, and he tracks down with whom she's having the affair, and it's this like tentacle monster, and it's this amazing practical squid puppet, and you see quite a graphic sex scene between her and the squid puppet while Sam Neill's kind of watching.
Wow. And
it is amazing, but it doesn't look real. Like, it looks like a woman having sex with a puppet, like the best puppet, but like yeah, but then I suppose you argue like with living creatures with CGI, like we still know it's not a real thing. So perhaps the moot point anyway. It's just, I suppose, a question of tone, that maybe we accept both of them as fake, but some part of our dumb modern brains, I think, thinks of CGI as being classier to Joe Public, as you said, whilst puppets are seen as throwback. So if you identify something as a puppet, I think that's, for Joe Public, a bigger failure than being not entirely convinced by a CGI thing, because you think of CGI as being the correct and expensive way to go.
That is really interesting analysis. And I think you could be right. Of course, we're influenced by, kind of the zeitgeist of what the latest cool thing is. And so soon it'll be, what, you're shooting on real sets? If you're not shooting, virtual production in Unreal, then it's crap. Why are you building things?
What is the cool thing? I suppose it's like AI-driven CGI is going to be a big thing.
Yeah. Yeah, or AI-driven writing, potentially, Michael, and then no more retreats for you at your top secret location.
I know. I'll take retreats to write code to write the script.
We may all end up doing that.
I think I saw some AI-driven CGI in a movie, which I also watched on this writing retreat, which was a movie called Synchronic, which is another kind of indie horror film. But it's it's about a guy who finds these drugs, and if you take the drug, the trip, it's a 7-minute trip. It's like a DMT trip, but it actually transports you back in time to a random point. And the way they do those time travel effects is like, the way I think, and I just only just watched it. Have you seen those like neural processing, like deep dream AI things, where it's like it'll be like a field, and then it will like kind of blubble and warble into a cityscape. But do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's these like transitions whereby it's almost like an AI morph, but the weird thing is that it at no point is a halfway image. It kind of always looks like something that your brain wants to try and solve, even though it is out of nothing. I haven't done hallucinogenic drugs much, but I've heard that it looks kind of exactly like that, whereby your brain is seeing often lots of like noise and fuzz, but has to graft it into something it can solve. So it kind of makes everything go.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah,
I'll put Synchronic. I'm gonna put Synchronic on the watching list. So thanks for that.
I think first thing tomorrow, I'm taking some DMT. Let's go.
It's early in the day for me.
That's
Michael,
true.
so,
That's true.
Yeah. More Michael Shanks next week in part 2. But thank you, Michael, for that. And obviously, quite a massive time difference.
Yes.
So it took quite some scheduling to make that work. I think he ended up doing a late night, and I did an early morning. So Michael was on a writing retreat and drinking beer, as you may have mentioned there. So it was we were very professional about the whole thing. But
obviously,
it was a really, really fun chat. If you want to find out more about Michael in the meantime, you can go to michaelshanks.com.au or follow him on Twitter, Instagram or YouTube, where his username is TimTimFed. TIMFED. And I think he explains that next week, so you'll have to wait and see. But yes, do let him know what you think via any of those platforms.
Now, Jamie, what can be found on the Gerry Anderson YouTube channel?
Oh, not much really. I mean, we've got some stuff on there. I think it's had about 9 million views in total on the YouTube channel. Yes, and there's all sorts of stuff from free episodes to primers to reviews, unboxings, a documentary series about beyond Anderson, about all the stuff that other actors have done beyond their Anderson careers, and loads more stuff besides. It's full of things, isn't it?
It is indeed. And of course, our podcasts that are posted there every week.
Oh, gosh, yes.
Beneath Pod 153, Keith Gooch posted another great episode of the Gerry Anderson podcast this week. All the cheeky banter between Richard and Jamie as usual. A good first part. You see, I love it that people think it's banter. I never think of it like that. We're just having a laugh, aren't we?
Well, is that not banter?
Well, isn't it? I don't know. A good first part of the interview with Toby Haydock. He says, I loved Chris Dale's Randomiser review of Fireball XL5, which will now forever be known as the one with space leprechauns in it. Thanks to Richard for reading out one of my previous comments. My comments about Space Precinct ending another career wasn't directed at Richard. I wouldn't do that. He says, I was referring to the likes of Nancy Paul, Nick Klein and Megan Olive, whose careers all ended with Space Precinct. Keep up the good work, guys. Well, I think that was entirely coincidental. I don't think Space Precinct's to blame. Is it? I don't know. Maybe it is.
I don't know. Maybe it was just a miserable experience. They put them off. Or maybe it was so amazing they thought, I'll never top this.
No, Ian D posted, great to hear Toby Haydock's memories of all things Doctor Who and Gerry Anderson, although I'm quite surprised that he doesn't like Star Trek that much. Yes, oh no, funny. And also beneath the Fab Facts regarding Ed Straker's second-in-command casting choices, Matt Ricardo said, I recently stumbled across a movie called Journey to the Far Side of the Sun from 1969. I was amazed at how much UFO stuff was in it, from cast, cars and locations. Indeed, Trevor Random says, I'd like to know more about the UFO set designer. So many cool things, the furniture, the artwork and the colours. Now, who would that be, Jamie?
Can't think now.
No, interesting. Michael Wiles says, we all know that poor Alec was dumped. Such a shame. He was an excellent hard man to Straker's cool, calculating approach. Wanda Ventham was excellent too, and I wish to take nothing away from her. I think my favourite episode, including Wanda, was, or is, Time Lash. I loved UFO then, still love it today. Rodney Kelly says, I found the constant changing of characters rather disruptive. If the actor is going to be leaving, why not have the fact that they would be transferred or something in their story arc? Classic Disney Room said, I've never watched UFO, to which GLM replied, rectify that ASAP. Quite right too.
Fair comment. Now, just on that, why didn't they have things about them leaving? It's because things were often shown out of sync, out of order.
Yeah,
they couldn't guarantee the order in which the episodes were played, so they could never have serial stuff like you get today, where things definitely play out in a particular order. So they could never really deal with that sort of stuff.
Yeah, that's right.
Tricky.
So do visit the Gerry Anderson YouTube channel. All sorts of stuff there, from primers to Fab Facts to Chris Dale's amazing interview articles and stuff. It's just stuff.
There is endless amounts of stuff.
Set aside an afternoon. Yeah, it's all there. And comment as well, and I'll read them out next time.
Perfect. I look forward to more of those comments in due course. Particularly the ones from people saying, I've never seen this.
Yes.
Now, Richard James. Chris Dale seems to have finished his writing. He's rolled up his scroll. He's taken off his wig.
He has, hasn't he?
But he's still wearing that sort of ridiculous outfit, and he's got the ruff around his neck and stuff.
No, I think it looks good.
Well, I didn't say it would look bad. You can be ridiculous and good, I suppose. Anyway, look, Chris is here because not only is he an expert contributor to the worlds of Anderson in general, but he also created and runs and manages the Randomiser, where he presses a button on his special machine, it picks a random Gerry Anderson episode, and he watches it, the full length of it, and gives you his thoughts and comments and makes some funny gags and all that sort of stuff. So, should we hand over to Chris so he can press his big red button?
Oh, yeah.
Over to you, Chris.
Hello, everyone. This is Marina. Chris has asked me to introduce this week's episode of the Randomiser to you. using that text-to-speech thing he got me for Christmas a few years ago. You see, he left recording this week's introduction until the last moment, as he often does, then after he did it realized he had made a mistake and introduced the wrong episode by accident. Yes, that is a thing that can happen. It's too late to fix it now, and he is too embarrassed to admit it, so he asked me to come out here and introduce this week's episode to you. He is too busy crying to do it himself. I don't mind. It gives me a chance to say hi, and also to point out what a fool he is, which cannot be overemphasized. It's bad enough you have to listen to it, but I have to work with him. But if I don't, who will? So with apologies for there not being a proper introduction, although I'm sure I've done a much better job than he could, I am delighted to reveal that this week's episode is Gunfight at Oakes Corral. Here's Terrorhawks. Stop crying, Chris. I've taken care of it.
So, welcome back to Terrorhawks on the Randomiser. It hasn't been too long since we were last here. Actually, for me, it feels like quite a while since I've done this, actually. I have taken a break from recording the Randomiser for, I suppose, the best part of a month, really. But you guys wouldn't know that because you get a new episode every week. And here is... Oh, I love this. Zero out in the field looking for some cubes.
10-10, Zero.
And he has...
Roll on. That was close.
Zero, come in.
I found him, sir. One of the swine just destroyed my helmet.
Presumably he has made himself a little hat for the occasion. A very, very important looking hat. That's trashed now. Oh, there they are.
That's 4.
Sergeant Major? Are you all right?
Yes, Mom. I'm drawing their fire in order to ascertain the number of the enemy.
And a nice example of Zero's bravery, which is going to be a theme through this episode. Also, his decision, oddly, to
I'm alone. They've shown them
to take on all these cubes as the only Zeroid in the battlefield.
Let's give it to him, sir, in capital letters.
Zero.
Of course, he's not the only one out there.
Send in the battle tank.
Because we have the battle tank.
Battle tank. Roll out.
Yes, I love this stuff. I just love watching the battle tank rolling over the terrain, and it's always normally a pretty barren terrain. There's
Sergeant Major Zero.
Plenty of
Alter course to 142.
Dead or very dry trees they can flatten along the way.
That's it, lads. Hold that heading.
It's a very nice looking vehicle, actually, the battle tank, considering there's not a lot to it. It's very simple. And yet it works extremely well.
Sergeant Major, get out of there.
Too late, Mom. Digging in.
Nearly got flattened by the battle tank there. Oh dear.
Sergeant Major? Sergeant Major, report.
Oh.
Still in one piece, Mom.
And I think that's a rather nice integration of the effect shots there and I guess the shots of Zero could be considered live action. Because he is a machine, you kind of forget at times like that he is actually being shot on the puppet stage, not on the model stage. But now the battle tank is making very short work of these cubes. Lots of explosions going on all around it, but it just keeps on rolling.
Zoids, give it to him, lads!
That's it, yeah, that's the spirit. Oh, lovely big explosions. That's 2 more cubes gone.
They can dish it out, but they can't take it, sir. Enemy destroyed.
Well done, Sergeant Major.
Oh, thank you, Mom.
All right, let's clean up the area and get back to Hawk Nest.
One thing I do find odd about this episode, this particular encounter, in fact.
10-10, sir.
How did these cubes get to Earth? How did these cubes get to be in Badwater County? Well, there's no time for that, because we're heading on over to this shack in the middle of nowhere, home of one Sam Oakey. And from there we are heading to Sheriff Bull's office. This is his first appearance on the Randomiser of Sheriff Bull.
You have a storm over your side?
You mean rain? Not since last winter.
Well, I could have sweared I heard thunder.
No way, Sam.
And Sheriff Bull, I may have...
Maybe I'll go...
I may have given this fact away in, I think, one of my Terrorhawks episodes. He's one of my favourite characters on this show.
I know if you find a snowball.
Because he's just... I don't know, the idea of a sort of very inept police officer.
Did you kill Roy?
It's quite an unusual angle for an Anderson
Must have been patrol woman Holland.
show to take. Everyone's normally very competent, very good at their jobs, and here we have an entire police department staffed by the most useless people imaginable. It's quite Simpsons-esque in that sense, the Badwater County Police Department.
My helmet blown to pieces.
Of which more later.
Had come to give the fateful order.
But I thought Dr. Neinstein was in command.
Well, he was in a manner of speaking.
Zero's recounting his exploits to Zeroid 2-1, the stuttering Zeroid.
I thought you said you were in the ground, Sergeant Major.
Because this was just before that point where
Where are you, Zero?
where they'd thrown Dee's Wheat into the mix.
Rather angry.
Like literally only an episode or two before.
I'd better go. Zero?
So 2-1 and 5-5 were...
he does sound a little irate.
Were sort of tryouts for a proper sidekick for Zero. Never quite made it.
The only fire I see, sir, is the fire in your eyes.
We have a problem. You reported 6 cubes out in that desert.
Yes, sir. Definitely 6.
Hawkeye's been working on the pieces you collected. We can account for 5. 1 cube is missing. We're going back. I want that cube located.
Hawkeye gets all the best jobs. I don't think he's even in this episode, actually.
10:50.
10-10, Mom.
Yeah, we often hear before he disappears for the second series entirely, we often heard off-screen adventures of Hawkeye, where he's either doing really dull stuff like putting pieces of debris back together, or he's getting reprimanded for... Was it... You disciplined Hawkeye for failing to log a service report. I want to say that was in Close Call, but poor old Hawkeye doesn't have a very good time of it, by and large.
I found it lying near this rock. Well, I tell you, it's the darndest thing I've ever seen.
Sam's got
For tomorrow, Sam, and take a look.
an interesting find. He's reporting to the sheriff. What could it be?
I guess I'll sleep on it.
Oh, it's most of a cube. Looking very beat up, but no less scary. Oh, and there it lights up. Again, there's something quite effective with the... I think the earlier episodes of Terrorhawks were quite good at making the cubes seem rather sinister, especially in that scene there where there's almost no light, just the cube pulsating in the corner.
For a moment I thought one of the cubes... No, it's nothing.
And an interesting hint there that Zelda has some kind of telepathic contact with the cubes.
Sandstone jelly, I think.
Youngstar's got more important things on his mind, of course.
Granite crunchies with a sugaring of quick lime. Zelda! Stop him! I'm thinking. Be quiet.
Yeah. Again, this is Youngstar in his
plan has failed.
His transitionary phase from
plans have failed.
Mastermind with plans of his own to
yourself.
A glutton with no mind at all.
Gluttonous wretch. Let that be a lesson to you.
Oh, they've brought that battle tank back to the desert, and this is an episode that establishes the town, I suppose you'd call it, of Badwater.
Port vector search.
Or the county of Badwater, rather. I'm never sure if what the town itself is called. And it made sense, I suppose, for the show to include some kind of area, because it was obvious that they didn't have the budget to show, I think I've discussed this before, full cities, and especially interesting landscapes, because that would have cost money. So there were a lot of deserts. So if you're always going to go back to the desert, why not make it the same desert? Why not make it the same area and sort of build that up a bit? Which they establish it all here, and then they don't really go back to it till the second series.
Listen to me, Earthling. You will hear only my voice, and you will obey.
I will obey.
Oh, Zelda has got control of
Actions in every detail.
well, a sort of rather old hick. for all intents and purposes. Probably not a whole lot she can do with Sam Oki. But perhaps it's not the use she can make of him, it's the use she can make of him in order to trap somebody else.
There's not much more we can do, Tiger.
Yeah. Except expect the unexpected.
Yeah, that's not very constructive, though, is it?
Dr. Einstein.
What is it, Hero?
We monitored a weak radio signal. Our computers have cleaned it up. I'd like you to hear it. We're listening.
Listen to me, Earthling. You will hear only my voice, and you will obey.
That's as clear as we can get it, Doctor.
Can you give us a fix on the location?
We can't pinpoint it, but it's certainly within 20 miles of your present location. Thanks, Hero. We need to widen the search area. And as Terrorhawks is a secret organization, we need to move around less conspicuously.
So?
Incognito, Sergeant Major.
Mom?
There he is.
How long do you think it'll take us to get there, Tiger?
Let's see.
Depends where we're going.
I think we're in Cognito. I think we're in Hudson.
Very droll, Sergeant Major.
Again, I like moments like that where it sounds like Zero genuinely didn't get the joke until that wonderful little Windsor Davies chuckle at the end. Meanwhile, Sam's been very busy.
Followed my instructions, and you have done well. So well, I have decided not to kill you. Yet.
Oh, she's so generous.
Have you some devious plan, my most devious mother?
I might have.
Yes, he's been... whatever he's been doing, it's involved some wood and some red paint, which will be revealed later. Meanwhile, as Hudson speeds through the county...
There's Kilroy!
There's Kilroy!
I got a live one, Sheriff. Gray Rolls Royce. Must be doing 100.
100?
Oddly enough, introduced in this episode, but not seen. We only hear him radioing in messages to Sheriff Bull.
Strange-looking dude with a big, shiny, bald head.
Mistaking Zero for the driver of Hudson, of course.
Speed's in my county.
Don't lose him, boy.
Shall I endeavor to lose this particular arm of the law?
Oh, why don't you do that, Hudson?
Yes, sir. Might I be so bold as to suggest that I alter my appearance by way of a disguise?
Very good. I like that. Good thinking, Asa.
Zero, shut up.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
Oh my goodness, I love Windsor. I love the Sergeant Major.
The fire in my eyes.
And I love his relationship with Tiger.
Right, sir.
Yes. Not always. At times it was just slightly too me.
I've lost sight of him, Sheriff.
Oh dear.
They must have been touching 130.
Suffering rattlesnakes. Hollins, where are you at?
This here's Patrolwoman Billie Jean Hollins.
Patrolwoman Billie Jean Hollins. Here she is.
My present location.
Another character who is introduced in this episode does not appear in person. We only hear her over the radio.
Kilroy is in.
But we never see her again after this episode.
Rolls color.
Oddly, we did just see Colonel Johnson's helijet was parked outside a building there for some reason.
And listen.
Sheriff Bull, Rolls Royce just went by like a rat up a drain pipe. Color red.
What color you say?
I said red. I'm going after it.
Oh, I love this stuff. It's so silly.
In 20 years, I've never seen one. Now we got 2 Royce's Rolls in Badwater County.
And of course, I can't let all this, all these scenes around the sheriff's office go.
Get in here.
Go by without mentioning something very important.
My name's Einstein. This is Mary Falconer.
You with the military?
Special services.
How can I help you folks?
Because in the Terrorhawks auction last November, there were several items from Sheriff Bull's office up for grabs, and among those were the red telephone on his desk that we saw him talking to Sam Oki on earlier,
From the military.
and the 2 diplomas from his office wall.
Well,
and something very interesting happened to both those sets of items.
he'd found some strength.
I bought them.
Was out in the desert.
That's right, because I love this character so much.
Thing you're looking for.
What's his name?
And I couldn't begin to tell you why, other than I think they did some very funny things with him when they brought him back in the second series. So here we are. I actually have it right by my microphone here. Here is Sheriff Bull's telephone.
Woman Billie Jean Holland.
It's in the plastic bag because unfortunately the paint is kind of flaking off the fleck, so I don't want to remove it too much. But there's the telephone, the very same telephone that's seen in this episode and when he returned in the second series.
It was parked right outside the station.
I mean, it's a fairly standard prop, but what I find interesting is it's got screw holes and the remains of a sticky pad on the bottom of it, presumably used to hold the phone to the desk so that when the puppet was using it, it didn't fly off everywhere with his hand movements. I also got from the auction, the 2 diplomas from Sheriff Bull's office wall. And we've covered those on a previous Fab Fact on the podcast. One is his Law Enforcement Officers Academy training course in police brutality, and the other one is his diploma to certify that he has never seen a Rolls-Royce in Badwater County, thus reflecting the events of this episode. And again, you can't see these on audio, but you can hear them. There you go. I hope that was enjoyable for you.
Need to talk, Einstein.
And slightly, I suppose it says something about this episode that I can say more about the props used in it than I can about the story as such, because it's not really
Life is in my hands.
Too interesting. I mean, I don't really care about Sam as such. I'm not really invested in
what's your proposition?
In his plight. Tiger's now got to go in exchange for Sam. So going back to Sheriff Bull's telephone, I was rather pleased to find, actually. I knew that it was his regular telephone in this episode when he came back in the second series, but I was surprised to see it turn up in Hawknest in the White House a couple of times in season 1. I think it's in the Christmas episode, and it's in Zero's Finest Hour and My Kingdom for Azif, possibly. So it's a very versatile prop for a basic telephone made of wood.
Well, I guess it's going to be a gunfight at Oki's Corral.
Tiger, it's suicide.
So yeah, basically I waffled all over what amounts to...
Get Sam Oki out of that cabin as soon as you can.
Yeah, they're going to send in Tiger to in exchange for Sam. And what looks like there, a very rare shot for Terrorhawks, actual outdoor location filming. There's a shot of a cactus framed looking up at the sun, and those were real clouds. That was the real sun, and those were real clouds. Very unusual for this show.
It's you and me, you cubic freak.
Oh, but yeah, I can't say this is an especially thrilling showdown. Well, there we see Sam Oki's, the products of his long night's work.
Trap! That's not a real cube!
Oh, thank you.
Mommy!
Oh, right.
Back, Mary. I'll handle it.
But thank you for explaining the obvious. Yeah, it's made of wood and painted red. Or painted with the little red mouth thing on. And there's another one, which he's also wasted 2 shots on.
Dummy.
So, yeah, it's not an especially thrilling climax.
Where's the real one?
I like that it's shot like an old western, especially that shot of Tiger's feet there. Also, that brief moment of us hearing his thoughts there when he said, "Where's the real one?" He didn't move his mouth. Oh, tripwire.
Put in the right place, Captain.
And another wooden Zeroid, wooden cube even.
Are you enjoying our little confrontation, clone?
No tricks, hey, Zelda?
I'm afraid I lied. Look out!
Oh, 2 more wooden ones, but there's the real one.
You need to recharge. You should learn to count, Einstein.
Oh dear, he's out of bullets. And she's going to use the cube to taunt him for a bit.
But remember, there'll be another clone to replace me.
And here it comes.
Me to enjoy the moment of your demise. But rest assured, The
next shot will kill you, clone.
And one day, you will be the last clone. Dr. Einstein.
Yeah, that line of Zelda's was used in the single, I think, of the Terrorhawks theme. Here we go, is Zero blown up the cube. And I love this as well.
Thanks, Zero.
Poor old Zero on the cactus.
Ooh, it's a bit of a ouch. Ooh, a prickly situation up here, sir. Ooh, ouch.
Oh dear. But I love that he gets to ride on a
He'll be fine.
on a little cushion up front in Hudson.
I'm a bit tender in the nether regions.
You, Sergeant Major. How's the arm, Tiger?
I'll live.
Yeah, Sam Oakey's rescue was so important that we don't even get to see it. We're just told he's off screen, he's fine. And that's it. Hudson is leaving Badwater County, but...
I just spied a green. That's green. Rolls Royce is on the South Road.
Oh, no!
And that's more than Sheriff Bull can take, and that's the end of Gunfight at Oakey's Corral. And of course, we know that we can understand why Sheriff Bull is so frustrated at Kilroy's report there, because as I can confirm from one of these lovely diplomas that were on the wall in his office, he has one of these diplomas to certify that he has never seen a Rolls Royce even in Badwater County in over 20 years. So he doesn't want to have wasted all that time that he spent studying for this. There you go, a little bit of backstory there on Sheriff Bull. I love that they were slipping little jokes like that into the set. I'm really happy to own some things from this episode. I don't have too much in the way of props and bits and pieces. As for this episode, it's okay, you know, it's not quite as dull as some of the early episodes. Getting towards the sillier stuff later on, some nice stuff with Zero. Nice to have a bit more of a location for where all this stuff is happening with the introduction of Badwater County. Good old Deputy Kilroy and Sheriff Bull.
That's
yes.
the Anderson Burr thing. Sorry.
Very good.
Yeah.
And he was a cowboy. He was dressed as a cowboy. That's what he was trying to do.
Oh, Chris.
I can see the cowboy hat now. Look, just below the table.
Right.
If he'd worn that.
Yeah, I wasn't convinced by it really, but thanks, Chris.
Yeah, I think he just sort of scrabbled around for whatever he had.
Yeah, he didn't have a proper cowboy's outfit, so he went for that sort of Edwardian dress.
Yeah.
Anyway, who doesn't love a bit of Terrorhawks? Well, the people who don't like Terrorhawks, but maybe they enjoyed that.
Maybe they did.
Yeah, I'm always happy to have a bit of Terrorhawks around, and we've got some interesting stuff coming up for Terrorhawks Day this year on 10/10.
Have we?
It's the 10th of October. Yes, we'll talk about that nearer the time because right now we are 5 months away.
You can't do that.
I will do that.
I hate it when
that's
you do
all
that.
that's happening. Sorry. I mean, there's lots of things I do that you hate. So, thank you very much, Chris. Chris will be back next week with more Randomiser. If you'd like to just listen to the Randomiser and not listen to me and Richard talking, you can just search the Gerry Anderson Randomiser podcast, where it's got its own podcast, and you can just listen to Chris.
Yes.
I've heard it's
Just
quite
like
good.
Have you? Who did you hear that from? Chris.
Yeah, to be fair, it was Chris. Yeah. But do pop along and subscribe there and leave Chris a rating, but also leave us a rating and a review on this podcast too, please, because without your validation, we are nothing.
That's very true.
Yeah, it is. Richard James, anything else before we wrap up this podcast?
No, I'm spent.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I think that, is it next week or the week after? Anyway, in the next couple of weeks, it's our 3rd anniversary. So I don't know if we're doing something special, but we'll certainly do something, probably just another podcast, to be honest. So we'll see you for our pre-anniversary and anniversary podcasts in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, we'll see you then.
Have a great week, Podstron. Goodbye.
Bye now.
Stage 1 complete.
Let's go.
Spectrum is green.
Yeah, so
I'm just looking
Yes.
to see what the 3rd anniversary... Oh, it's leather. It's our leather anniversary, Jamie. I can give you those lederhosen.
Oh,
at last.
great.
I've been saving them for a special occasion.
Well, I'm so glad. Have you worn them in for me, or?
Oh, of course, I'm wearing them now.
Oh, I wonder what the squeak was.
Yeah,
That's good.
yeah,
Do you have to powder lederhosen before you put them on?
Yeah, well, yes, a little bit of talcum powder to get them on, a little bit of WD-40 to get them off.
Right, okay. Well, that'll
All right,
explain
just
the
word of
state of
warning.
them when they arrive.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, so nice.
Yeah, so you've got me lederhosen. I'm still working on your gift.
Okay.
But
I'm just going to end up with an old dog chew or something, aren't I?
Yeah, a bit of chamois leather. That'll be all right.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
I'll at least, maybe draw your face on it or something. So.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, makes the world a difference.
This is getting more and more offensive, isn't it? I'll go away and think about a gift. You have a lovely week. And
all right.
Happy
Bye now.
pre-anniversary. Bye.
Yeah. Oh, I must get these lederhosen off. Oh. Oh.
You have been listening to the Gerry Anderson Podcast. Wasn't it fun?
You have been listening to an Anderson Entertainment production.